Right now, in April of 2026, Washington, D.C. is being absolutely consumed by a political firestorm. And the central question isn't about policy or budgets. No, it's about something much more fundamental: the president's fitness to hold the most powerful office on earth.
And this whole crisis was really thrown into the spotlight with this one single, incredibly blunt accusation from Congressman John Larson as he filed new articles of impeachment. The charge wasn't just, a political disagreement. It was a direct challenge to the president's mental stability.
And that brings us right to the heart of what we're going to unpack today. Are we watching the symptoms of a leader who is genuinely medically unfit to govern? Or is this all some kind of carefully crafted political strategy, a form of calculated chaos, designed to keep everyone, especially his opponents, completely off balance? Because the answer you land on, well, it changes absolutely everything.
So, to really get this, you have to picture the scene. The Capitol is completely on edge. You got two powerful and very different efforts moving at the same time through the halls of Congress, and both are aimed at the exact same thing: challenging the president's authority to lead.
Okay, so let's get into the nuts and bolts here. What are the actual constitutional tools that are at the heart of all this? Well, critics are trying to use two very distinct mechanisms to remove the president from office. One is impeachment, and the other is the much-talked-about 25th Amendment.
Now, it is so important to understand that these are two totally different paths. Think of impeachment as a punishment. It's a political process, basically a trial for high crimes and misdemeanors. But the 25th Amendment, specifically Section 4, that's completely different. It has nothing to do with punishment. It's all about protection. It's a functional tool designed for a situation where a president is simply unable to do the job, whether that's because of a physical coma or, as critics are arguing right now, a mental breakdown.
Okay, so what's the actual evidence that's fueling this whole push for removal? Well, the people behind this, they aren't just pointing to one single incident. They're talking about what they describe as a really disturbing and escalating pattern of behavior.
See, the case here isn't built on one single mistake or one slip-up. Instead, critics, and that includes some mental health experts, they've actually put together a list of 15 distinct behaviors that they argue point to a leader who is clinically unfit for the job. So let's break a few of these down. First up, you've got the cognitive and verbal signs. We're talking about speeches that just kind of devolve into what's known as word salad, sentences that don't logically connect. Or the weave, which is a term for when he completely avoids direct questions by jumping to totally random topics. Critics also point to confabulation, which is basically inventing details to fill in memory gaps, and repeating the exact same stories over and over, sometimes just minutes apart. And then you have the personality and emotional signs, things like what critics are calling extreme grandiosity, most famously posting that AI-generated image of himself as a messianic figure. This goes hand in hand with the systemic paranoia, this constant belief that there's a deep state conspiracy out to get him. And then there's the reactive aggression, just exploding with rage over tiny criticisms. And what psychiatrists call inappropriate affect, like, say, laughing during a tragedy. And listen, this isn't some abstract theory. This is all blown up just this month. On April 7th, those impeachment articles were filed. Then, over Easter weekend, that messianic image appeared online right alongside a bunch of posts filled with profanity. And by April 14th, a bill was actually introduced to create a formal commission to assess the president's fitness under the 25th Amendment. I mean, the timeline just shows you how fast this thing is escalating.
So you look at all of that and you might think, okay, case closed, right? This seems pretty clear. Well, not so fast, because there is another completely different way to interpret these exact same events. And this is where we get to the other side of the coin, the counter-argument. You see, the president's supporters, and even some political analysts, they argue that what looks like mental instability is actually a brilliant, if pretty unorthodox, political strategy. They're saying it isn't a symptom, it's a weapon.
So the whole defense really hinges on this classic idea from foreign policy, the madman theory. The strategy is pretty simple, actually. You deliberately project an image of being so irrational, so unpredictable, that your enemies become terrified of provoking you. They end up backing down, not because you're necessarily stronger, but because they think you are just crazy enough to do anything.
And this is really where those two realities just collide. Let's take that Messiah post. The incapacity view sees a clear delusion of grandeur, but the calculated chaos view, they see a powerful, if a bit provocative, signal to his religious base. What about the impulsive threats toward Iran? Critics see a terrifying risk to global security. Supporters, though, see a textbook use of the madman theory, a way to keep an adversary completely off balance. Even his habit of dodging direct questions gets two starkly different reads. Is it a sign of cognitive decline? Or is it a savvy media tactic to frustrate journalists and control the narrative?
So you might be wondering, if the pressure is this intense from one side, why hasn't anything happened? Why hasn't the constitutional system worked? Well, the answer is that our system, it's been pushed to its absolute breaking point.
Just take a look at what it actually takes to use the 25th Amendment against a president who doesn't want to go. First, the vice president and a majority of the president's own cabinet have to agree he's unable to govern. Then, if the president fights back, it takes a 2/3 supermajority in both the House and the Senate to make the removal permanent. I mean, the constitutional bar is incredibly, incredibly high. And at the end of the day, all of these constitutional safeguards, all these checks and balances, they all boil down to one single fragile thing: the political will of the people in power to actually use them.
And this quote right here, it just perfectly nails the problem. The very people who are supposed to be the fail-safe, the vice president and the cabinet, well, they were all appointed by the president. They are loyalists. So when you have officials like the Secretary of Health publicly saying they won't even support a fitness test, the entire mechanism that was designed for protection, it just becomes paralyzed.
And you have to understand, this is so much bigger than just a political drama playing out in Washington. The inability to resolve this crisis is having massive, cascading consequences for the entire world.
I mean, the stakes really couldn't be higher. First, and this is the big one, the nuclear question. A single individual who is seen as dangerously impulsive has the sole authority to launch nuclear weapons. Domestically, government agencies are basically paralyzed, completely unsure how to respond to erratic orders. Globally, our allies in NATO and beyond are losing faith in America's stability. And maybe most fundamentally, when the leader of the free world seems detached from reality, it corrodes the very idea of truth that democracy depends on.
And all of this leads to the ultimate nightmare scenario, what you could call the dilemma of the generals. It's an impossible choice that no military leader should ever have to make. What do you do if you get a legal order from the commander-in-chief that seems completely insane? If you obey, you could trigger a global catastrophe. But if you disobey, you're committing an act of insubordination that could shatter the entire democratic order.
Which leaves us all with this final, really unsettling question. Even if removal were possible, what would the cost be? Would forcibly taking a president out of office, whether it's for incapacity or misconduct, actually heal a divided nation? Or would it be seen by his millions of supporters as a coup, and in turn, ignite a political firestorm far, far greater than the one we're seeing today? There are just no easy answers.